Hello, gunfighters, and welcome to Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about gunfighting and gun-related stuff the right way with God at the center. Gonna try something a little bit different. You guys are probably familiar if you've listened for any length of time, so I think I'm gonna forego the lengthy bio. Try to abbreviate it. First and foremost, I am a Christian. That is number one in my life, serving God, following Jesus. Combat veteran, served in the United States Marine Corps and the Army. Also law enforcement veteran, private contractor, state rifle and pistol champion. Pretty succinct. You want to support? Go to Patreon. Should be a link in the show notes. Boom. Let's get into the day's rifle. The Ruger M77. Now, if you're kind of a gun aficionado, especially a bolt-action hunting rifle aficionado, you may be acquainted with this rifle, but a lot of people, I think, that have gotten into gun culture 2.0, the ARs, the black rifles, and the Glock 19s, and there's nothing wrong with that. This may be a mystery to them. Well, this story kind of starts out, I guess you could start it out when the Chinese stumbled across black powder, but let's kick it up a notch to the late 1800s and the legendary, storied, trusted Mauser 98 and that classic action. A renowned action. Controlled round feed. If you don't know what that is, I did a whole episode, push feed versus controlled round feed. I may talk about that more, but I don't want to get down that rabbit hole. Because if you're not into the technical aspects, you might kind of tune out. But it's out. It's known for being rugged and reliable, dangerous game rifle. Just workhorse, legendary. So legendary, we copied it. I believe we got sued and lost, meaning we as in America, to the Germans, because we copied it in the Springfield rifle we took into World War I. And I think we also may have gotten sued and lost on the cartridge itself, the 30-06, which is very close in between the 7x57 and 8mm Mausers. Anyway, it's a great rifle. A great rifle. Well, after the Great War, it kind of became known how great these rifles were. And they were used and copied in sporting rifles. Most notably, America's Winchester Model 70. The Rifleman's Rifle. Classic, American, iconic. Did a whole episode on that rifle as well. I may re-release that soon because it's way back in the feed. But just, that's known as the Rifleman's Rifle. They took the Mauser action and the things that made it great and they sporterized it, made it, instead of geared towards a battlefield, geared towards the modern hunter. And it is just well known. If you're among kind of that classic hunting crowd, it's kind of a special thing, the Winchester Model 70, especially the pre-64s, which in 64, in an effort to cheapen manufacturing costs, they went to a cheaper push feed action. You'll see most rifles today are push feed actions. Winchester went to a push feed action, and they stayed with it up until the mid-2000s. So all those ones after 64 are push feeds. They're Winchester Model 70s kind of because that's their name, but they have very little in common with the pre-64s. Well, when this happened, I think a lot of Americans that really like controlled round feed were kind of left looking for something. And Bill Ruger steps up. Ruger, the gun company, is kind of known for making not necessarily the most innovative designs, but making things that people want with good quality and affordable to the common man. So I think I'm going to title this episode, if the Winchester Model 70 is the Rifleman's Rifle, the Ruger M77 is going to be the blue-collar Rifleman's Rifle. For the common man, the 9-to-5er, the middle-class American that wanted a good, robust, controlled round feed rifle. Up steps Bill Ruger, and he says, how can we make this action and make it good but affordable to the common man? And I think he did a good job at that. Ruger is kind of known for that, making things that are good and affordable. And out comes the Ruger M77. The first iteration of this. These are commonly known in gun nerd vernacular as tang safeties. It's easy to identify. They have a tang safety, much like a modern Mossberg shotgun or a double barrel shotgun. they have a tang safety. They're known as the tang safeties. These are the original M77s. A good rifle. By today's standards, maybe not the best. They didn't have, a match grade trigger, but back in the day, that wasn't really something hunters were looking for a lot of the time. They were a good working man's hunting rifle. Controlled round feed, robust. They weren't maybe the most accurate rifles, although the one that I've only ever owned one, I believe, and it was very accurate. It was a 22-250 bull barrel tang safety. It was crazy accurate. But they have a reputation for not being that accurate, but you got to remember the time period. This was well before the days of laser rangefinders and all these other things. This Ruger M77 was a good rifle, but it could have used some improvement. Well, out came the Mk2. And the Mk2 improved a few things on it. It went with what I consider one of the best safeties of all time. You'll see this on the Winchester Model 70s, the old pre-64s, and the newer ones. It's a 3-position safety, which allows you to completely lock the bolt in the action, which if you've ever done some kind of hard hunting in willows and briars, any kind of dense, nasty environment, you shoot an elk and it goes down in a really nasty ravine covered in willows and things like that, or in real thick manzanita bear country, you throw that rifle, you sling that rifle, it's not uncommon for something to get in there and open that action and drop your round out, or just leave your action open or partially open. So when you go to shoulder it, you think you can shoot, but you can't because the action's partially open. This 3-position safety lets you lock that action in place, which is great. Also, it has, you might think of it as a half cock. It's still perfectly safe, meaning you can pull the trigger and the gun won't go off, but you put it halfway, and it very easily goes forward if you want to bring it up to the shoulder and fire. But it lets you work the action, and this is great because it lets you safely load and unload the rifle with the weapon on safe. You may think this is an important feature, you may not think it's an important feature. That's up to you. But I really like it. I also find it very ergonomic. I really like this style. The Mk2 went to this. Mk2, Ruger is also kind of known for being one of the pioneers in stainless steel. They offer stuff in stainless steel. Again, for working guys that do stuff hard, guides, professional hunters, things like that, people who want a stainless gun. And they offered these in stainless, these Mk2s in stainless. And they are still well known and well reputed for being hard hunting rifles. They also will probably save that for what some of the cool iterations of this rifle are. So put that on the shelf for now. We'll get back to it. Now there is the Ruger Hawkeye. I don't know, it just says Hawkeye a lot of the places I look, but it's still the M77, whether they call it the M77 Hawkeye or not. It's still very much in that lineage. They tweaked a few more things on it. From what I understand, it has a very good trigger compared to the older iterations of this gun. And that's going to be your new iteration, the Ruger Hawkeye. Now, let us talk about some of the really cool, because they've had some really cool versions of this over the years. One of the iconic ones I'll go back to that we sort of mentioned, all-weather stainless steel model with a Zytel stock. And these are kind of known in the gun circles as the canoe paddle stocks. They kind of look like a canoe paddle, but they're very utilitarian. They have really good sling attachment points right out of the box. They're stainless steel. They, especially for wet climates, are kind of a wonderful rifle for that. They're simple, they're robust, they're controlled round feed, so they're known for that reliability. They're stainless steel. Stainless doesn't mean that it won't rust, but it's much less likely to rust. And unlike a blued gun, if you get a little bit of rust on the outside of it, you can just take some steel wool and rub it off, and who cares? If you do that on a blued rifle, you have a big patch of unblued rifle. You got to go and cold blue it, and then it looks like just a cheap job on there. It doesn't look the same. So these stainless rifles, they're working man's hard-hitting rifles. Those M77 Mk2 Zytel canoe paddle stocks, all weather. I think the official name was the all weather, and they were an amazing gun. They still are. You can still find them on the market. They also make what I consider is one of the most beautiful guns of all time. Not just M77s, period. Any gun ever. They've made it on the Beautiful Guns episode. They made several versions of the International. International has a Mannlicher stock. If you don't know, it's the stock that comes all the way out to the end of the gun. It kind of has a lot of times it'll have a pretty ornate end of the stock, and it will usually have really beautiful iron sights. And it's just a very classic, unique, beautiful look. And you can get that beautiful look in a functional, operational, controlled round feed hunting rifle. They are just exquisite and beautiful. And they also made that in stainless steel. Not just to look beautiful, but to be a working man's rifle. I got to imagine if they only wanted it to be a wall hanger, they would have just made it in blue and walnut. But they made it in stainless steel because they expect people to hunt with it, I think. And that's awesome. A beautiful gun that you can hunt with. And use hard. You don't have to baby it. And they're some of the most beautiful guns I think ever made, period. Also, it's the Ruger Scout rifle. But if you look at it, it's the same action, same controlled round feed. They could have went with the cheaper push feed models they have, the Ruger Americans, but they didn't for the Scout rifle. They kept that good controlled round feed. Stainless steel on some of them. Either laminated or polymer stocks on some. If you're not familiar with the Scout rifle concept, have done at least 2 episodes on Scout rifles. And probably mention them many other places. But they're kind of this quasi do-it-all practical rifle. And people that love Scout rifles will tell me I'm not describing it correctly or in depth enough. But this is for the layman. This is not an episode about Scout rifles, but Ruger makes one. And if I could pick one, I may pick another one depending on environment, but I would most likely pick the Ruger Gunsight Scout rifle. And it's built on that M77 action. Even though I don't think they call it the M77, but lightweight. You can mount a forward-mounted optic for kind of snap and speed shooting. You can mount a more traditional scope on it. It has iron sights, which it really saddens me that most bolt-action rifles today don't have iron sights. But this one does. A great rifle. Talking about ones that came out with iron sights, they also came out with one of their all-weather versions with that really cool stock I talked about in 7.62x39. Talk about apocalypse gun. You know, one of these controlled round feed in 7.62x39, apocalypse. I don't think it came with iron sights, but you could install iron sights. It's stainless steel, it's a controlled round feed. Going back to why you might want a controlled round feed, when so many things today are push feed, and so many people are touting this, shoot this elk at 1,000 yards, you won't even know you're there, you can go to the bathroom and they'll never know. If you spot and stalk and still hunt, I know there's things we should do, but we don't always do, right, in life. Sometimes you have to hunt with your gun without one in the chamber because that's considered loaded. You may have to walk on a road and you don't want to get hit by fishing game for having a loaded gun walking down a road because that's a violation. And when you get deep in the woods, you're supposed to remember to chamber around. But as somebody that's forgotten to load his gun before, that doesn't always happen. And that might be the time when you're still hunting and you realize that good buck that you have been spending hours and hours to find, you finally in the area. And that controlled round feed will let you much more silently chamber around into that action. Meaning you may be able to take that buck, where if you forgot with a push round feed, you hear a pop and it pops up into the chamber, then you got to slam it forward. It's not a quiet process. Maybe the difference between getting that buck and that buck running away. Also, for that really positive controlled round feed should mean that round, that really beefy Mauser claw extractor has positive control from the time it strips it off the magazine and inserts it into the chamber and then removes it from the chamber. It's got positive control. Eliminates quite a few malfunction scenarios that you might have for an apocalypse gun and for just a hard-hitting hunting gun. A dangerous game gun. That's a big deal, to me at least. Some people don't care whether it's push feed, controlled round feed. I really like controlled round feed. You can get that. You can get that in one of these all-weather rifles. You can get that in the Ruger Scout rifle. Because if you're talking about like a one rifle, probably I would want that controlled round feed. I'm actually looking right now, this may air before or after the Alaska rifle episode. My wife and I are looking to go live in Alaska. I'm looking at an Alaska rifle, and my number one choice right now, this may change, is the Ruger Guide Gun in 30-06. It's stainless steel. It's got iron sights. It's controlled round feed. It's a beautiful rifle. Kind of checks the boxes. But you're talking about like a hard times, hard hunting tool. That's affordable for the common man. Like Mauser still makes Mauser 98s. When I looked on their website, it was, I think, $14,000 and some change. I don't often mention prices. 14 grand and some change is probably out of the reach of what your average Joe 9 to 5er is going to buy as a hunting rifle. You get, dare I say, the same action modernized. Maybe not as fine fit and finish, but for practical hunting purposes, in the M77. Blue collar, working man's, rifleman's rifle. Going back to cool models, they also make an Alaskan and an African iron sights. Really cool rifles. If you're looking for like a big bore dangerous game gun, you might look there. They're just an awesome rifle, and I think a lot of people, especially maybe people aficionated in the new gun culture or people that are so mesmerized by all this long range hunting, may not see the value in a good controlled round feed, traditional action, traditional hunting rifle like this. Or for the preparedness community, right? There's some real advantages there. And even if you never buy one, hopefully now you better know a rifle. The Ruger M77. Hey, if you appreciate this content, if you appreciate good, clean gun content without swearing, taking the Lord's name in vain, and you find it informative, and you want to support, consider becoming a patron. If you want to support and get something tangible, maybe consider checking out the gear shop at goodshepherdtraining.com, goodshepherdtraining.com. And also, contact me that same way, goodshepherdtraining.com. With that, the tactical tip of the day, and then the tactical verse of the day. Your tactical tip of the day. I encourage you, men, to carry a knife on you. At times when you are conscious and out and about, you should have a knife on you as a man, I think. Whatever kind of knife that is, you might consider also carrying a ferro rod. A ferro rod, a ferrocerium rod, is a way to make fire. That's not much of a tactical tip to carry a ferrocerium rod, and they're used for making fire. Most of you probably know that. They're cheap, they're inexpensive, they're a great way to make fire, even if you fall over in a creek or something and they get wet. But a ferrocerium rod is iron and some other elements. It's relatively soft compared to knife steel. Unless you have like one of the worst knives ever, it should be much softer than that. And you can use these, if you know your angles and everything and how to sharpen a knife, in a pinch to also sharpen a knife. So not only you have this as part of your EDC, can you make a fire or signal if you're lost and somebody's trying to find you, or whatever other things a fire does for us, purify water, you can also use it to sharpen said knife without carrying a dedicated knife sharpener. Is it the best knife sharpener? Is it a work sharp or a Ken Onion knife sharpener? No, it's not. But you can have something on you to be able to sharpen a knife with a bunch of other utility. And maybe you already carry one, you didn't even know that. So that's your tactical tip of the day. Ferro rods, good for more than just making fire. Tactical verse of the day. But the end of all things is at hand. Therefore be serious and watchful in your prayers. And above all things have fervent love for one another. For love will cover a multitude of sins. You'll find that in 1 Peter. With that, men, thanks for listening and have a blessed day.